Hey guys, how's it going? How you guys doing this week? Fantabula. Awake. Yes, me too. All right. Yes, let's get it started. Let's see, everyone here. 8, 9, 10. Yep, everyone is here. Right on time. Awesome. Okay. So... So it's funny, I myself have been having some issues with AMP, and it's like going from, it's basically what's happening is it's interfering with my VPNs from like my work from home stuff. So I think by next week I'll have to have it either just we'll do Q&As from my Mac, which is not as fun because I only have one monitor. I mean, I guess I could plug it into this monitor. But yeah, it's been like 2 weeks troubleshooting, still nothing. So if that doesn't get figured out by this week, then we'll get it. But otherwise, I mean, basically for the Q&A and everything, we'll cover a lot of this stuff. It's just a lot of the AMP stuff is what is giving me problems right now. So anyway, that said, let's talk about what's important, which is the assignment and the lecture and all of that stuff. So okay. I wish I had it right. First, does anyone from last week, I mean, I think we got introductions like out of the way. I mean, for the most part, we got everyone introduced, and except for Sean and Mark, but you guys sent emails. Do you want to just cam you guys really quickly and have you guys just say hi and here, let me put on my headphones just because they're talking and you don't want to hear that echo. It's like one of the hardest things is like hearing yourself talk while you're talking. So. So, Mark, let's just say hi to you. And then in terms of like these questions for Enrique, like I'm not sure how they work with. That's the way what I'm thinking is that like you just email him directly about that stuff. But I mean, we can also just like if it's really important, maybe get that cam up there. I already have. Okay. So for the answers, Mark, let's talk to you really quickly. You have everything up and running now. I think. It's good to have a ninja in the class, definitely. Where did my folder go? Oh, there it is. So probably just waiting for lag at this point. Has anyone thought of any questions? Oh, there you are, Mark.
Hey, okay. I'm so happy it worked.
Yes, it's all up and running now. So, welcome.
Well, thank you. Hi, everybody.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like for basically off the questions from last week, like what brought you here to AM and.
Like everybody else, I was a nerd growing up who was very into animation, and I actually, when I was younger, went to Sheridan College for classical animation.
Oh, you did? Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Got a job doing layouts for a Saturday morning cartoon. It was
Oh, cool.
2D.
Nice.
And they shut down a year later. There wasn't a lot of 2D background work. They found by just doing the storyboards a little more tight. They didn't need the problem-solving skills that we had, so they just shipped everything directly overseas, which made our job obsolete.
Oh, interesting.
So I got a temporary job in order to buy a computer and start learning computer animation, because that was right around the time that 2D just seemed to be nosediving.
Yeah.
That temporary job laid me off after 11 years last month, which puts me.
Wow. Okay.
Life. Everybody knows how life gets in the way. There was family illnesses. Got married, got a house, got kids, and
yeah.
So now I feel like I'm coming out of hibernation and getting back.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting. As everybody else was upset and crying about being laid off, I was skipping out the door thinking this is a great opportunity because I've got a big severance package and an unemployment opportunity.
Nice.
That allows me to sort of do
there you go.
I would have, if I had the opportunity, I would have done this a long time ago.
Yeah, that's cool. So wait, your temp job didn't have anything to do with animation? Or
none whatsoever.
Blue
collar. Yeah.
Wow, how cool. What a great. And now, are you in LA or are you in Canada?
I'm in Canada.
That's mine. Oh, okay, you're in Canada. Okay, that's what I figured, because so many cartoons, animations coming from there.
I'm about a 45-minute drive from Niagara Falls.
Nice. And I never made it out there, unfortunately, when I was at Blue Sky. I always had like this idea, I'm going to drive up to Canada to Niagara Falls. I'm going to go to Nova Scotia and all these places, and didn't do it. And maybe later. But what a cool story. So that's great. I want to ask you more questions.
Yeah.
Lately, what's some animations that you're like really liking right now, 2D or 3D?
Saw Epic, liked that. What else have I seen? I'm anxious to see what Disney's going to do now. I think the last thing I saw them do was Tangled, and I like that. I'm curious to see what's coming next.
Tangled, it looks great.
I want Pixar to stop making sequels.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I read something recently that Ed Catmull said that they're going to stop making sequels for a while. So I think you got your wish.
I understand the reason. I realize every time they sort of want to try something new, it's never as financially successful as the sequels are.
Yeah.
But I like it when they take those risks. And I remember when they talked about Disney, how after Snow White, he lost money on the next 3 or 4 films, and he still had that drive that, don't worry about it, we'll make it back later. And
Cool. Yeah, and that's what Pixar is, that's how when they started, that's where their whole thing was the originality. And they still do it. They still take some risks. But yeah, I agree. Definitely agree. Cool. All right, well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate your introduction and welcome to the class. All right. Sean, should we try you again? Yeah, you sent an email introducing yourself very thoroughly, but does your camera still work? I mean, even just to say hi. I kind of like just like having everyone's face come up and say hi, and we can try that, can't we? There you are.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing? So you gave us your introduction in the email. It was very thorough.
Sorry, say that again?
You introduced yourself in your email, and it was very thorough. You gave us, the big introduction, so I don't think you really need to sit here and tell us that again, but I at least wanted to say hi. And so, any questions for us?
No, not really.
Not yet? Okay. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, thanks for that, and welcome to the class. Glad everything's working. All right. Right now. Okay, so I have a question for you guys. What do you think? What do you think is the most important thing in animation? Like out of all the things in animation that we have, what's the number one most important thing? Timing and spacing, hugely important. Hugely important, yes. But there's something even more important than that. And try to think on a bigger scale. Try to think on like what are we doing as animators? What's the most important thing that we're doing when we make an animation? And pose to pose, yeah, I mean that definitely has something to do with all these answers, the observation, of course, giving life to things. What do we do when we give life to things? You still conceiving a message so the audience can understand it. Being able to communicate through animation, believability, all those things, yes, exactly. We're telling a story. That's all, like when it all comes down to it, when it's all said and done, all we're doing in animation is telling a story. And whether it's a short clip or a single pose, we want to make sure that our audience, like you guys are saying, is getting that message and is understanding that. And we're using all these tools. We're using these 12 principles of animation. We're using timing and spacing and overlap and follow through and pose to pose, staging, all these things. We're doing all of that. But at the end of the day, if our audience is confused by that message, then the worst thing you can do, the worst sin as you can do as an animator is bore your audience, is to make them be like, I don't want to watch this anymore. You've automatically lost your audience. And then so your animation has failed. It's just like, okay, if it's boring, it's not communicating what you're trying to say, and even if it's not communicating what you're trying to say, and like you're keeping your audience there, I mean that's at least you're entertaining your audience. But exactly, Mark, you're entertaining, and so that's what we have to think about as animators from the starting gate. We have to understand, okay, is our audience able to understand what we're trying to get across? And as we're doing this, is our audience capable of being entertained by this? Are they receiving this message? And so what's the biggest way to tell a story through a character? What's our biggest tool here when we use a character? Like what's out of all the principles? Like what are some that are, and there's more than one, of course, but like what are some that are going to bring that story across? Body language. Okay, how do we get body language and appeal? Through posing, exactly. So which are key poses? Exactly. Body language and appeal, and they all come through the poses. The key pose. Now, what is that? What is the key pose in an animation? What does that mean? Any hints? I mean, you guys seem pretty savvy in terms of like all the animation lingo and everything and everything like that. So minimum poses that get the idea across, specific frames that must be in to tell the story. Sometimes the extremes. Yeah, strongest pose, those who are actually telling what's going on. Yeah, exactly. If you were to take your scene and in animation, for whatever reason, your shot, like that one single shot, different than live action filmmaking, that shot is your scene. And so when you're working in your scene file, the key poses are the ones that are going to tell the story of that. You might have just one key pose. You might have one pose that just says, like, okay, this is the pose that's going to get that idea across and really inform the audience of everything. The way I like to see a key pose is a tent pole. I like to say, like, okay, that pose is holding up everything else. It's holding up the timing and spacing. It's holding up the animation. It's holding up everything. It's like where the key pose is here, and everything else goes down into that. It just keeps the building up. It's the cornerstone of your animation. So that said, there are many ways to get that key pose. Like we have many examples of like when that key pose is very clear, and I'd like to show you some of that. But like first of all, working with our character, like how do we there's one more important step that in combination with the pose that works almost like just as equally. Like if we don't have this, then our pose isn't becoming clear. Now what's that other thing that you see? What do you guys think of that one thing? If we don't have the pose, we don't have this working with the pose, then we're losing that clarity. We're already making sure that we're already losing our audience in that sense. What do you guys think is that other thing? And it's one of the 12 principles. Silhouette has to do with it because it's all part of that. Like silhouette actually combines the pose and this other thing. And kind of think on a meta level. Think of like okay, like how if we're the audience, this is something that we never really see in a sense. Like if you think about that way. Because well, you'll see like how do we get clarity. Let's go back a little bit and think about where is our character in our scene. Like how do we know where it's staging exactly? Staging. Where our character is the most important thing. And the reason why I say it's like kind of meta and kind of like this thing we never really see, even though staging is hugely important, is that we never see the camera in a scene, but we're always looking through it. The camera is our audience's eyes. Like we tell the audience where to look the entire time. Just the same way an actor on the stage, or I like to even think of it more like as animators, we're more like, and this is kind of corny. I kind of hate how corny this sounds, but it's true. Is that we're like stage magicians, because we at all times have to direct our audience where to look, because at any moment when they're not looking where we want them to, our stuff falls apart. And that's the same with a stage magician. It's like the same thing. If he's not saying look over here while he's doing his bag of tricks down here, and the audience is looking at the wrong place, then his tricks fail. And it's the same thing with us. Like we have to always tell our audience where to look. We have to be captivating in that sense, and we have to understand, like, okay, this is how we're going to get our stories across, and this is how we're going to get that believability of our characters if we are really good about that. Now, one live action actor was the master of doing that, and to this day we can look at him in that reference and really understand, like, wow, okay. He had it in a way back then, but the way he approached his filmmaking was a lot of the ways the stage actors at the time were working, and he was one of the first ones to figure that out, that the camera is the stage, and that you're basically telling your audience that you know where you are on screen as an actor is where the audience is, like looking at that stage, if that makes sense. And so yeah, you got it, Mark. It's Chaplin. So let's just really quickly just look at some Chaplin, because I want you guys to see like how as a live action actor we see the poses in his work. We really understand that he is communicating it through poses. He was also a silent film actor, which that had a lot to do with it. Like that kind of forced him to make those decisions a lot more carefully about where he was on screen and what he was doing. But his body was his instrument in communicating these ideas. And the whole time he did that, he was always sure that he was clear in his poses. And that's what we're focusing on now. Now later, we can look at this clip again, knowing as we build on top of those 12 principles of animation, you'll see that there's a lot more than just posing that's going on here. But what the fundamental things, if we take a snapshot of this scene and look at it, and then we'll see, okay, like that's clear because his posing is so clear. So let's just look at that right now and get this going. You don't really need, did I already unplug it? Yeah, you don't really need the music, but can you guys see that? Okay. Okay, good. So let's just carefully watch this scene. And this is a setup. This isn't Chaplin yet. This guy is. Well, you'll see. I don't even have to give an introduction to this scene because it's so clear. Just as a character, he is very unique, and that's coming across in his poses. Just the way he stands, the way he walks. If we think less about the motion and more about each pose, even the walk, if we break down every single individual pose, we'll see that his character is defined. We actually see this character come across in that. The way he sits, the way he does all his actions. But even then, if we were to take, oh no, stupid QuickTime. This clip is pretty long. Let's see, it's back here. There we go. Even if we take, let's see, let me try to do this without screwing up QuickTime, because it's nice that I can step through this stuff. Even if we take something that wouldn't be considered a key pose, which is anything, we have breakdowns, we have in-betweens, and we'll get to those later, but anything that isn't a key pose isn't the storytelling pose. But even with Chaplin, if we take any of those poses and it's in between one pose and the other, he's still in character. He just, even his in-between poses, his breakdowns are in character. But as we see, a key pose is something like that, where as he sits down, that's one of the storytelling poses. His objective was to sit down on a bench. He sat down on a bench. That's his key pose. Yeah, this is I believe City Lights. I show this clip so much, but it's I have the whole box set, and so that's what this one is. Also, as we think about this character on screen left, the whole time is stuck within this pose, and this pose again very, very clear, very, very staged towards the camera. We see that the character is observing him, he's not moving because we don't want to distract from what Charlie Chaplin is doing. And it's really interesting to see how that plays between each other. So he's doing his actions, we're seeing it very clearly, and he looks over and he doesn't move out of that pose the entire time. Because we're not looking at him anymore. We almost forget that he's here. Again, the actor, the stage magician, whatever, is pointing, is telling the audience where to look. We're saying, look over here. Charlie Chaplin is saying, look at this. More importantly, look at this. He brings a flower, he sits down and brings a flower and starts smelling it. I don't know if anybody does that anymore, but it adds a little quirkiness to his character. And it's something that's kind of interesting, you know what I mean? It's just weird. He just decided that he wanted to sit down and smell a flower, and okay. Good actors do stuff like that, though. Good actors actually just stop and smell it, literally stop and smell the roses, exactly. So good actors do stuff like that, and we can see it in modern films as well, where an actor will do something that makes that action very unique. And I've read a lot of stuff about screenplay writing and just like storytelling and stuff like that. And one thing that even going in animation and video games, when we get voice actors to come in and work, they'll always add something that a good actor will always add something that the director or the writer or the animator didn't think about in their original phase of like conception. Like they're thinking, okay, like maybe this is the way the character is, and the actor will come in and add a new touch and do something quirky or do something that's very unique. And it's so refreshing to see. And this is something exactly like what Charlie Chaplin would do. Is something like this. It's odd and quirky, but it works for his character. And so we on the screen, not to stray from the point too much, on the screen we see two key poses. We see two very clear storytelling poses, and we can capture this just in a single frame and know what's going on. This guy obviously wants to harm himself in some way, tying a noose around his neck, and we don't see the rock or anything like that, but we understand that there's something weird going on with that. He doesn't look too happy. And Charlie Chaplin is like who pointed it out, Brandy, he's just stopping and smelling the flowers right now. He's just like sitting down and kind of thinking that he's in his own world. He didn't even notice this guy as he was walking down, but that's his story point at this point. That's his story beat, and that's what's very clear. And so we can continue that. Now he sees him. Doesn't really pay much heed to him. He's just like, yeah, whatever. Again, each reaction shot, and this is something that's used in films and animation, is like that reaction shot to show what that character is reacting to. And now we see that, again, a key pose. We see he's a little concerned, and like it's starting to dawn on him what's happening. So he stops him. Now we have some very clear things here, and I want to take this and use this as an example of something in our poses that we see, and we as animators should look at. And it's a simple thing. It's actually taking a pose in its most simple form and understanding like what that means when we get it. Does anybody have any ideas where I'm going with this? Like what's a simple, like the most simple thing that you can get in a pose? That it's basically like where we start our pose. Weight has something to do with it, definitely. But it's even more simple than that. Yeah, line of action. Exactly, it's a line. So we can see Charlie Chaplin, his line is to keep this guy from falling in. So this guy wants to fall in. His line is very, very clearly going in this direction. So we see that line. And then we see Charlie Chaplin is countering that. Now there's this reference from Preston Blair's book. And this is like one of the coolest examples of line of action to me. I mean, it just clears it up so simply and just so clearly, and so we can see this. What is a line of action? An imaginary line extending through the main action of the figure. Plan your figure and its details to accentuate this line. By so doing, you strengthen the dramatic effect. The first thing to draw when constructing a figure is a line of action, then build over that. So you start with the line, and then you build your character around that. That makes things very simple. It also adds to clarity, and it helps with the communication of your idea. So we see this, and what I love about this example is this here, is that they show this clip of like a Tom and Jerry style cat, and without a clear line, with just a bunch of weird stuff going on, like the line isn't defined and isn't perfect, and it just isn't clean. It's just all over the place. And so we don't know, even though this character is punching the other one, the way the lines are represented, it doesn't add that clarity and that dramatic effect. But then we see on this other side, where it's just very clean, simple lines, we see that, and we understand like this character is using their force. Like think of that line of action as a force of action. Like it's where that character is going and what that character is doing in the most simplest form. So yeah, we see that and we get that clarity. Like that character is punching, that force is going in that direction, and this force is countering that. So you can actually Google this, and this page will come up. Just put Preston Blair line of action, and so I don't even know about that, Brandy. So I'll have to write that down. It's called Force by. Let me copy that. I don't know if I can copy that. Let's see if I did. No, I didn't copy for some reason. Yeah, and there's a few. I think that's the one. Who does that one? Dynamic life drawing for animators. That one's really good. Let's see. That's the one I'm thinking of. Now there's another one. And this book I've been meaning to get for a while. I will find out the name of it. But for now we can keep it pretty simple. And just understand like this is a really good way of getting clarity and also simplicity in your drawings. So Julian, would line of action apply to everything in the same way? Cartoons, real life shorts, would it be more exaggerated in cartoons? So that's a great question. Like, well, do you apply it in the same terms that you would in live action? And if we look at this, like going back to this, like to Charlie Chaplin, we see that his line of action is there, and it's very exaggerated. It's very much like if we for what the human body can do, he pushes it to that limit. Like he really gets that exaggeration across. He probably pushes his ideas a little bit further than you would just naturally doing it, right? And so that's the area where in animation we always want to think about exaggeration, and that's kind of the next step from line of action. We think about exaggeration and how we push a pose. So if we think about this, like if we think about just like this one pose here, and it's just, you know, kind of bland, and there's not really much going on, and it really could be pushed more. Now, unfortunately, this next example, I can actually go in Maya and try to do a better example of that. But here we have a line of action that's actually pretty solid, and it's pushed and exaggerated, and we're really getting those ideas larger than life almost. It's just getting to the point where we're going further than what we feel comfortable with almost, because we really want to get that clarity across, and we really want to get that appeal across. All these things, the line of action have a lot to do with the exaggeration and appeal of a pose. So yeah, like how that would relate to live action. Like of course, live action in this sense, in Charlie Chaplin's example, like he's really pushing his poses really far. And there are other examples, and you can tell, like just like with that Steven Spielberg clip that I showed you guys, you can tell the directors that really think about that and really think about, okay, how are my actors going to be represented as clearly and really shown in a way that's dramatic. And sometimes some directors want to go a little bit more subtle with that, and that's fine. That's a different thing. But again, the whole time we're thinking like this is a stage that we're looking at, and so in that sense, things need to be exaggerated and pushed. And how that's represented, of course, depends on the director, and some directors are way more subtle about it than others in terms of that visual punch, but a lot of them use that in that same sense. I don't think they're consciously thinking, okay, line of action, let's try to put that in there, but they are thinking of exaggeration and clarity and communicating to the audience. They are definitely thinking of those things. So yeah, just things to consider. So, I'm sorry, did I miss something? Oh, Wayne Gibson, that's the one. Sean, that's totally the one I was thinking of. My coworker has that one, and yeah, that's one of the best ones in my opinion, because it just has like just a really good, clear, simple way of like getting thumbnails down. So if you guys can find that one, I think it's what's the name of the book again? Just wanna Simplified Drawing. Coming up. Wait, is that what it's called? Yeah. Yeah, if you can find that one. I would definitely recommend it because that one's great. In fact, you know what? Next week I'm going to try to, because I know my coworker has it, so I might try to get some. I should just order it honestly because it's that good. But there are some great examples in that one. Anyway, yeah. So let's just continue watching this clip, and then now think about that. Think about key poses and lines of action in that. Where we get, I mean, look how exaggerated that is. And we went through several poses here. That pose, very, very strong and direct all the time. Like always thinking about that, very strong and direct. So he gets back, he finds his mark again, which is basically going back to his point where he should be standing for the staging to work. And again, like, I mean, just every pose, it just has like it's pushed a little bit more, and it has that exaggeration, but more importantly, it has that clarity. And they don't even really need that. Because you understand, like, even these actions here, he's trying to inspire them. He's not becoming inspired by it. Even that, he's changing over, be brave. and just that, I'm just pausing almost randomly here, and every time I do, it's a very clear idea because the staging works with those poses, and everything is very clear. And that's pretty much it for this clip. I mean, we could watch this over and over again. Let me just find. Someone asked the name of it, and I just. It says City Lights, right? Yeah, you're right, City Lights. They're all great. I mean, there's always great examples of him, but this is why a lot of animators will say, like Charlie Chaplin he really has that. He is a human cartoon basically. He has all those exaggerated things that we like to strive for in animation and get our points across in his work. So yeah, I can definitely recommend just watching that for good ideas. So taking that and looking at other thumbnails, like thinking about our thumbnails now, just like how we're going to bring our thumbnails together. Of course, our thumbnails for this assignment and for every assignment, for everything that you work with in animation, any pose that you do, anything that you're striving for in animation. When you're doing your planning phase, it's important to understand that your planning phase is for you and you alone. Like it's really not for anybody else, and if that makes sense. Like you're not going to take your thumbnails and then show them to your director in any pipeline that I've worked in. Like you're never going to do that unless you're really just like thinking like, okay, well, this is what I'm considering, and I'm not ready to start yet. Maybe show it to your lead, show it to another animator. But it's one of those things that it's more of a personal thing. It's more a part of just getting ideas down on paper, and really just thinking, okay, like the more I work with, the more thumbnails I get, the looser I am with them, the less stress that I put on the drawings being very good. Like not every animator that I know is great at drawing. And there's some great animators at Pixar that aren't they learn their medium either through stop motion or through CG purely and are great at that, but they're not the best at drawing. They have an eye for it. Now it's different. Like it's one thing to like really train your eye for what a good pose is, and being able to execute it in the medium that you're working within. So thinking about this, like you're doing your drawings more as an idea of like going out there, maybe sitting on a bench with your flower, smelling your flower in your sketchbook. You're doing your thing and looking at the rest of the world. Go to a coffee shop. Go to the DMV if you have to. For whatever reason, go to the DMV. Make it a fun exercise and actually go and people watch, because you'll see some really interesting stuff in there. You'll see the way people react, especially under a stressful situation. No one wants to be at the DMV. So yeah, you get an Amy reference there, right? Find areas that you think are interesting that you'll find people interacting with, and just understand and try to use your thumbnails as just like a way of jotting down an idea. The same way you would be like, oh, I have this idea for a video game or a story or a book or whatever. I'm going to write it down and put it down on a piece of paper. Think of that with the poses. And if you aren't the best at drawing, just try to understand this. Like maybe even write those notes. Maybe just say like, okay, to try to quickly draw that line of action, draw that line out, make some little, thing that the character was doing, the person that you're observing was doing. And then even this has like, well, this is better silhouette. So, but even this does things like notes like that, either are written down and saying, more than what I'm showing here, basically, is what this artist is saying. Like there's more that I should be thinking of. But through all these, just look at the lines themselves. Like you can clearly see the lines of action in all these. That every pose has that line of action. So I know it said in the syllabus we aren't allowed to use props, but can we use basic shapes for ground wall box, or should we do without it? Yeah, no, it's totally fine. If you guys want to put some simple geometry as like your character was sitting on a bench or something like that, that's completely fine with me. Or a wall. I mean, just think very simple. I mean, this should be within your basic primitives in Maya. But yeah, that's fine. Sometimes, and also be careful of that. That's a great question, because sometimes, especially in this assignment or in the pose assignments within this class, students will try to do a pose without any sort of prop or without just anything else within the scene and just the character, and sometimes that can get lost. Like sometimes the idea can become lost to the audience and to me. Like I'll see something, I'm like, I'm not sure why a character is floating in air with their hand. It's like, oh, well, what I was trying to do was this. The character was sitting on a bench or doing something like that. I'm like, okay, well, in that case, if you're if you're ever unsure about like that clarity and think, oh, I need a prop for this, first email me and say, I am thinking about doing this. What do you think of that? And maybe I can help you get to a different come to a different solution within that, or I can just say, yeah, use that, and then that will be clear. Or even in your notes section, you'll see when you turn in your assignment, you'll have a little area to write me notes, and if you use that, that's really good. You just say like, okay, this is what I was thinking with this pose. Like, does that work? Is that what you're thinking? But ultimately, to me, the best test for a pose and its clarity is to show it to somebody, and even show it to someone that isn't an animator. That's always something that animators sometimes tend to like start thinking, okay, like what were they going for? What is their thing? If you, lots of somebody's, exactly. But show it to your significant other, show it to a friend, show it to someone that has no idea, just isn't interested in animation at all. If you have kids, show it to them. That'd be cool. It's like, what do you think this character is doing? And if they can get that, then you're on the right track. If they say something completely different than what you were going for, then you're probably not on the right track, and you should reconsider that. But that's a good pose test. It's a good test to say like, okay, what's happening? How am I getting this point across? And if you are, then you're on the right track. And if you're confusing your audience, again, it goes back to what we started this whole Q&A about. Is are we telling that story? Are we communicating that story clearly? And if the answer is no, then there needs to be, start reconsidering things. Start reconsidering maybe the staging. So reconsider the pose itself. And go through that. So, any questions so far about any of that? Any other questions? Okay. So you'll notice that Stu, not the most expressive character by default. Like there are definitely other characters out there that have a lot more going for them in terms of basically everything. And that's kind of the fun part to me, and I think it should be the same for you guys. Is just like understanding that your limitations are going to be the assets that you use to show and clarify a pose. And if you can get a pose across or a point across with this character, you can get your point across with any character. And that's what's really great about using Stu, is that this character is so bland and so generic that you understand that you are infusing a lot of your personality just within the way the pose is set. Now, with that said, there are certain things that this character just can't do. I mean, he can't make facial expressions. The general rule with animation is that your facial expression should mirror your body language. Your body language should mirror your facial expression. So think about that. If your character is sad, you can get that point across. If your character is happy, you can get that point across. But there are certain subtle things, like and this goes more for staging than anything else. Like, don't just go, okay, here my character's sad, because you can't see the face, but I promise you that if I have face, the character is sad. I mean, you can't do that. This has to be a full shot, meaning we have to see the character from head to toe. We have to understand, like, okay, we're expressing to the audience through the body, not through the face. And of course, I mean, it seems obvious. It seems obvious that I say that, and I know that, you guys. But I mean, trust me, there's times when it's come up, so I just have to say that. But yeah, like a full shot, that's not always something that people think of. Sometimes people will think of like, oh, can I do a medium shot or something like that. And for this one, think of it as simple. Think about your audience for your staging. Think about your audience, and that's me and everyone else in the class, or in the school actually, that you're showing your work to, and your friends and whoever. Think about us as sitting in a seat in the theater, and your character is on the stage. Now, that doesn't mean like, well, if I'm at, in the theater, I'm at the top box or whatever like that, then I'm looking at from here. No, think of it just like very simply, like you're in the middle row, probably front, like you're right here. You're looking at your character from that stage. You can angle it, but I mean that's what I'm just trying to say. Like if your character is on a stage, if you're on a stage as an actor, you're opening up to the audience. You're showing that like when you're expressing something, you're doing it to the audience. You're not doing it to the other actors. You're doing it to the audience to make sure that the audience is clear. So, mine in the park. But yeah, like this will help you keep your staging very simple and really understanding. Okay, I can get staging that's relatively simple. You know, you can angle up and do stuff like that a little bit, but for the most part, something like this will work. And it's okay for this one. Like we'll get into rule of thirds for those that don't know about that. We'll get into more. I mean, everyone with a smartphone now does that automatic thirds, breaks up that stuff already. But even still, if you don't know about that, it's not something to worry about too much. Just think about some simple staging. And even if your character is completely in the center, for now, that's completely fine. And that will work. But yeah, simplicity is key here. Simplicity is key always. You know, and that's something that you should always reinforce yourself. Is that am I getting that point across in a simple and efficient way? And if you're overthinking something, you're putting too much, again, that starts to add confusion. And there's some great examples of that I can show later, too. That it's like things getting a little bit out of hand with that. Brandy, that's correct. Your focal point should never be like right in the middle. And that's for staging that, you know, that's like, you know, if we're thinking about this as a movie or whatever, or just anything like that, then we probably shouldn't make it that focal point completely centered. Now, there are times when a movie will do that, and for a very specific reason. But like I said, like this isn't something that you guys should worry about too much. It's okay if your pose is right in the middle for this, as long as the clarity is there, as long as the camera isn't doing something really weird, or isn't like really doing something like that, or your character isn't doing something really weird, where they're you know, like their body is like, well, we need to see the head, and that's it. And I'll get into that right now, but I just want to make sure everyone's really clear that staging can be very simple. It should be very simple, and it's okay if it's centered. You know, ideally you bring it off to the side a little bit so it's not completely centered, but that should work for everything. So, everyone clear on that? Yeah, exactly, Dominic. This is a pose assignment. So everyone knows. Okay. We've talked about staging. We've talked about key poses. So one little note about key poses is that when you're out posing your characters, again, this is just it goes back to clarity. If your audience can immediately understand what your character is doing, then you're getting your key pose down. But just think about when you're out there getting reference. Even if you don't get the best reference, keep drawing that pose until it makes sense to yourself. Like even if you find something you're like, that character wasn't really standing the way in a way that was very clear when I draw that thumbnail, or that person wasn't, then redraw it. Use that just as a reference point, as a starting point. Use that as a starting point and just say, okay, like now I can keep drawing this pose and make it more clear, and keep drawing that same pose over and over again. I'd rather see one pose drawn 50 times or even 10 times than 10 different poses, because that means that you're exploring the idea of one pose and how to make it as clear as possible. Now, it's okay to have variations of more than one pose in your assignment, but I'd like to see, especially if you find a pose that you like, explore a lot of poses, but if you find a pose that you like, that pose should be drawn at least 3 or 4 more times. You should keep working with it, and understand that you're always striving to make that pose a little bit better. I think it's in The Illusion of Life, where I think it's Frank Thomas that says this, but it's been so long since I've read it. But it's one of the things that stuck with me, that to find a key pose, he would keep drawing that pose on top of that pose, on top of that pose, on top of that pose, and just making it more exaggerated every time. And then he'd take the most exaggerated one, he'd get to the point where it became way too exaggerated, and then he'd take that pose away and use the one that was the one below that. But that's how many times, as an animator, he was exploring that same pose. He kept drawing it over and over and over again until he got it right. So that's the way I want you guys to get into that habit too. Like, you're exploring a pose to make it clear. You're not just shotgunning a bunch of poses on a piece of paper. You're really exploring those ideas. Any types of poses you would prefer us to go towards, or maybe a better question, anything you want us to stay away from? Sean, that's a great question. Okay, so as long as it's clear, that's great. Now, the things that you should watch out for, there's one more thing, one big thing that I didn't get into yet, and that's silhouette. Now, you guys are probably familiar with silhouette, just understanding, like, okay, like that, if we can, and I already saw it, I think, Brandy, you pointed that out, but yeah, like, that's something that if you don't have clear silhouette, then you're not really showing clarity in your poses. So one of my favorite examples, and this is one of my favorite animators of all time, is from Mark Davis. And this is his stuff from Pirates of the Caribbean, from the ride. Like, this is his concept stuff for the ride. And he just had such a natural sense of putting silhouette into his characters. Casey, I'll get to your question in a second, but yeah, there you go. Everyone else will. But like that, it's the sort of thing that he does with, like, he will take. I mean, this is something that someone that isn't as experienced would take two characters here, and we have two characters, and add a lot of complication within that, because it's something that's easy to do. It's easy to get out of hand with those two characters. Just like the Charlie Chaplin clip that we saw, there were two characters interacting, and when one character was the focal point, the other character would just stay out of the way. And even if that character, we saw that one character was up here on, where is he? Up here on screen left, and the whole time was motionless, like we basically became invisible. And that's the same sort of thing here. Like this, Mark Davis has two characters that he's working with, and as a whole, we see those two characters, and it becomes pretty novel and funny. But if we look at the silhouette, we really understand that all we're seeing is this one character, and we're really getting that idea there. So, yeah, some great stuff. You really get that sense. We see the line of actions here, even with something that with this shape is not as clearly a single line. There's a lot of stuff built around this with the dress and everything like that. We still see clearly like those lines of action, and those are represented in the silhouette. Now, one thing about silhouette, a lot of people mistake silhouette for being able to see both arms and both legs at the same time, and that's not always the case. And this is a perfect example on this pirate here, is that you don't see his arm. You see a little bit, and you understand, like, the arm is over here, but we get a great silhouette just through that. We don't have to see both arms here for that silhouette to work. Even here, we don't have to see both arms. We don't even have to see this other character. That's what's great about this one. But know that you don't have to go too far out of your way to make that silhouette work. As long as your idea worked within silhouette, then again, and this is something that you can show to anybody. You can show that silhouette to anybody, and if it works to them, then you're good to go. So that said, that said, watch out for like just what I showed you right now. Watch out for this. A lot of times, this character, as soon as that head becomes the enormous head, and a lot of times that can get in the way. Like that can create some weird stuff. So be careful of like putting that in front of other things, stacking it on top of other parts of your character. Watch out for foreshortening. It's something that can add a lot of depth, but you can also lose a lot of clarity within that. So like here, like if we look at that and think about that as a silhouette, we're losing that arm, and we're not really understanding where it is as an audience. So with that, I would say like maybe give it a little bit more depth. Think about it as something that can be more natural. And just watch out for foreshortening. That can get resize Sue's head. Wait, what is this? That's hilarious. Yeah, make it 3 times as big. No, keep the size the way it is. It's a challenge that you'll find it annoying. Trust me, you will. But it's a challenge that works, and I think it's a good one. So don't resize his head. That's hilarious. You're working with 2 things here, and this is on purpose. You're working with IK and FK. So this arm is IK, this arm is FK. What that means specifically is that some of you guys that took the Maya Springboard class will know this. Some of you guys that have Maya experience will know this. But just know that you rotate down on FK and down the chain, and your IK you use that translation, and that manipulates it up through the chain. So it's inverse kinematic. Again, not something to know about the technical details, because as you create this character, as you create these poses, the reason why it's done like this is so you get experience with both, and then you can understand that, okay, I can get that pose the same way with FK or IK. When you use when you use IK, just understand that you do have to use the arm twist or the elbow PV, the pull vector, the point vector, and that will help determine where that character's elbow is. Otherwise, you're going to let this the elbow go where it is once you're posing with that, and it'll start to look really weird. So that's one thing to look out for. There isn't a switch on this one, because that's the point of this exercise, is to understand it's just to get that idea across of like understanding for now just like what it is to work with IK and what it is to work with FK, and we just want to know that as exactly to learn to use both. So the legs are going to be IK, and that's by default, because most characters have IK legs, and we'll get into why they would switch. We'll get into all that stuff later. Also know that you can translate the head around, and that's something like you can get like a cleaner line in the neck sometimes by doing that. Like just by default, we don't really see that neck, but you can get some cleaner lines by just bringing that head up a little bit, and that's completely okay to do. In fact, I'll probably give you guys that note several times in your critiques while going over that. And what else? I think that's it for now. Let me just think. Any other questions so far? For now, there's really no restriction on the pose itself. In terms of later on, if you guys have read the syllabus, there's going to be excitement pose. There's going to be devastation and strength and poses like that. for now, as long as it's a key pose, I'm okay with it. And by that, what I mean is as long as it tells a story, as long as that pose can tell a story and be clear and communicative, that's what works for me. So, yeah, no specific props. You can use, you can bring in some geometry, like basic shapes, like Casey asked, like just if you make a cube or something, and you just want your character to sit on that, that's totally fine. That's okay with me. So, definitely get something from live reference. And sometimes you can go out there all day and sit at a coffee shop. Coffee shops are, I don't know. Like if you can sit at a coffee shop and look outside, that's probably better than sitting at a coffee shop and looking inside. The problem these days is I used to say like watching people stand in line was always a really cool thing. You'd always get like a lot out of watching someone just stand in line because you'd see that either they were annoyed or impatient. But now all you see when people stand in line is this. You just see that. And it's like really boring. So so try to find places where people aren't in line and aren't on their smartphones and just looking at their phone all day long. If you find that and you want to use it as your pose, I have nothing wrong with that. And again, you can use that as a little prop, like you can bring just that cube down. I mean, it's okay with me if you use little props, as long as it's clear. As long as what you're doing with that prop is a very clear thing and it's not overly exaggerated or overly complicated, then I'm okay with it. Yeah, don't let them see you drawing it. I remember that a lot in art school, like just sitting there and drawing people, and they'd be like, "Why is that person drawing me?" And no one's ever like confronted me about it or anything, but it was always just like you get weird stares, which is kind of fun too. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, just have fun with this assignment. That's really the most important thing. Is just kind of learn to loosen up in your thumbnails, keep your drawings clear, and communicate those ideas. That's really keep your poses clear and communicate those ideas. That's really the most important thing to think about here. So, sound good? Any other questions before I go? If I can't get interesting poses from taking some pictures, can we look at some pics online? Yeah. Carlos, I think that brings up a good point. I would say look at maybe pictures online is okay, but I would say like look at movies, the actors that you really like, stuff like that. That can totally work too. You can get some really good stuff like that way as well. So, and that's completely fine. So if you guys want to do it that way, that'll work. Sound good? Okay, that's it for week 1 or week 2. Let me know if you have any questions. And email me if anything comes up. All right, take care, guys.